You can't even take a picture of the building. The guards come out and want to take the film out of your camera, just like the old Soviet Union. But this place needs scrutiny. It needs examination. People need to learn about it. And by the way, I want to say to everybody, if you want to learn about the Fed, first read Tom Woods' New York Times bestseller, Meltdown.
Right.
Exactly will explain to you what this institution is and why it needs to be not only examined and the sunlight shined on them, but really it needs to be abolished if the future of our country is to include prosperity and freedom.
Tom, I wasn't fully fair to the federal judge because I just quoted the most outlandish part of his opinion, and he obviously gave other reasons on the record. But I'm scandalized that a federal judge would be afraid of anything in our system. But Congressman Paul, who couldn't be with us, his proposed legislation has 170 co-sponsors in the House and now has been introduced in the Senate by the socialist independent from Vermont, Senator Bernie Sanders. So you never know where this is going to go. But if the Fed were audited, if this bill became law and a judge's fear of blood in his hands meant nothing, what in the name of God do you think we'd find out?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, that I'd like to talk to Dr. Paul about, because my understanding is that everybody around the world knows that the Fed is engaged in all kinds of phony baloney accounting, and that if you actually got a real audit, it would blow the lid off the whole thing. Because, I mean, just imagine, what would you do, and I don't mean you, Judge, in particular, a saintly man, but, I mean, what would the average person do with the types of power Ben Bernanke has and that the Federal Reserve Board has? You know, they can create legal tender money out of thin air by grant of government monopoly. You know, the idea that this isn't going to be abused is pretty well laughable, and I think Congressman Paul's idea is that once people are able to look at this thing for the first time, and it actually is talked about as a political issue for the first time in almost a century, that's step one to then thinking about what needs to come next. And incidentally, sometimes we hear people saying, well, you know, you folks, you have no solutions to propose. All you want to do is abolish things and get rid of things. Well, you know, what do you propose in its place? And just before I came on the program, I put together links to all the free market economists like Henry Hazlitt, Murray Rothbard, F.A. Hayek, and Ron Paul, and how they propose step by step to get out from under the system we're in and back to a free, sound money system. So I put that on TomWoods.com, my website, so that we can easily go. You can go there and see that there is a way out of this. This is not a fated existence. We don't have to live with this thing. It is not part of nature. It's not just a given factor of life. We can free ourselves from it.
I was scandalized, though, that a federal judge would use that phrase, I don't want blood on my hands. Same federal judge that basically told the Treasury to go take a hike when they told Fox, and other news media, by the way, joined in the lawsuit, when they tried to tell Fox to go take a hike, that they weren't going to release the TARP documents, which we since have seen, including former Treasury Secretary Paulson's notes, which included a threat, and basically said, if you don't let us buy stock, expect to hear and accept the TARP funds, expect to hear from your regulator. That regulator, Tom, would be the FDIC. And what the FDIC could do to any one of the top 15 bank holding corporations in the country could be almost catastrophic for its shareholder value, for its employee time, and for its public relations in terms of a 3 or a 4 or a 5-year audit. And that's basically what Hank Paulson threatened. We would not know about that threat had it not been for the Freedom of Information Act request, which was complied with by order of the same federal judge who's afraid to do the same thing with the Fed. Tom?
Well, to me, there should be outrage upon outrage all over the country about this, and yet, you know, all we get in the major media is just a big echo chamber where issues like this hardly ever come up. You know, once in a while they'll write an article about Paulson or they'll write an article about Bernanke, but they're still overawed by these people. When Bernanke was interviewed by 60 Minutes, I forget who the journalist was, but instead of confronting him with issues like this, which have just recently become known about, but all the mistaken predictions he made, all the boneheaded decisions. Instead of asking him that, before going in to see him, he's walking through the Federal Reserve building saying, ooh, look at this wonderful building. Look at this big seal. And, oh, what was your childhood like? Or, what's the toughest part of being a central banker? I mean, it's like they all come from Pravda, our journalists.
Right.
And even if they weren't a bunch of toadying lackeys, they're too ignorant even to know what to ask. I mean, how are we supposed to keep a free society with people like this running the media?
Guys, the tweets have been coming in. As you know, Shelley Roche is here with me, and I think she has one for Lew Rockwell.
I do indeed. All this talk about, solutions, and if we are able to audit the Fed, what happens next? Adam CFL asks, what would our economy look like without the Federal Reserve, and what will happen after an audit?
Well, without the Federal Reserve and with sound money, we'd have what seems like almost a science fiction situation. Your money would be worth more the longer you held it. The money you would put away as a young man for your retirement would buy more when you retired, because without the Federal Reserve constantly diluting the money supply, your money would just be, and with the capitalist system producing more and more goods and services, your money is worth more all the time. So this is magnificent. Also, we wouldn't have artificial booms and busts like the dot-com bust, like this housing bust, and much wider, of course, than housing. So we would be far better off. We'd be a far more prosperous society. Every American would be better off economically, from the top to the bottom of society. Poor people would be better off. Rich people would be better off, and all the rest of us, and everybody in between. What's going to happen next after Ron Paul's bill? If this bill can get passed, and I can guarantee you that the bad guys in Congress, Pelosi, Reid, and for that matter, McConnell and Boehner on the Republican side, are scheming for ways to block this bill or to make it so that it has no effect, because they're scared of this bill.
I got to tell you, Lou, in an email that Ron Paul sent this morning, in which I said, what's the strongest argument against the bill? He said, you're not going to believe this. You just won't believe it. The argument they're making against the bill is that the government shouldn't get involved in private enterprise, and the Fed is a private bank. Now, A, they have never admitted the Fed is a private bank. B, since when have the Democrats or any of the big government people feared the government getting involved in private enterprise?
Well, of course, again, this is the holy of holies of the modern American regime, the Federal Reserve. We couldn't have this worldwide empire. We couldn't be fighting all these horrible wars all around the world if it weren't for the Federal Reserve. George Bush never had to worry about getting a vote on an appropriation because they didn't have to tax or borrow the money. They could just print it up. So that kind of business could not go on if we didn't have a Federal Reserve. That's what they fear. We'd return to a situation where the finances of the federal government would be like that of a state. If they issued too many bonds, if they did too much spending, there'd be questions of default on the bonds without a central bank. So there'd be tremendous restrictions on government overspending and overreach in every area of life.
And Judge, by the way, you notice the only private enterprise that Democrats typically don't want to involve themselves in or regulate are phony baloney private enterprises that are basically government monopolies, like Fannie and Freddie that had monopoly privileges. Oh, they don't want to regulate that. Or the Fed, which has a monopoly privilege to issue money, they don't want to regulate that. Those are the parts of the economy that most need the regulation, because we, the taxpayers, are on the hook for all the boneheaded things they do. Those are the things, if we're going to have them at all, which we shouldn't, those are the things we should regulate. The private economy and the profit and loss system can regulate itself. It's precisely institutions like this that need oversight, and naturally those are the ones they want to leave unchecked.
Guys, we have to go. Lew Rockwell, Tom Woods, it's always a pleasure. Until next Wednesday on Freedom Watch. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we get Dr. Rand Paul on.
Thank you
The thing is, I get emails on this all the time. What can we do? What can we do?
Yeah.
What can we do? Now, you are part of a movement, Shelley, of young people that does things. What advice would you give to me to tell the hundreds of emailers that email me every day, what can I do that I should tell them to do?
That's a great question. I get that. That's probably 50% of the tweets I get are, what do we do? What's next? What can we do to make this happen? And I think, using the technology tools that we have available to us really helps us organize. It helps us spread the word. There are so many more people today that know what's going on in the government because of shows like this and the internet and Twitter and Facebook and that sort of thing. So that's one thing. That's where you can get started.
Well, the internet is certainly the key, and Freedom Watch has become sort of a a focal point, if you will, of a lot of freedom-loving individuals, many of whom are as youthful as my good friend Shelley here and as youthful as my next guest, for exchanging information, political information, economic information, tactical information about who's up, who's down.